So you're a phenomenally strong woman,
Thanks.
and you're
Thank
bringing
you.
mobility to rock climbing, which is
Yeah.
pretty unique in
Yeah.
itself. Um, how has it been received in the rock climbing community to kind of bring some of this technology of extreme hip mobility? What sort of feedback are you getting from the rock climbing community?
So far, it's been mostly very positive. I think climbers understand that when they climb, it's very apparent. Like if they can't get their foot up to the hold that's right there, they're like, oh, I must not be flexible. And so, like, that definitely registers almost immediately for them. However, because there's just so much about like how stretching doesn't really help you perform, or maybe it doesn't work, like that maybe they've tried things that just, they haven't really seen any changes. So I think that they know that they suck at flexibility, but they don't really know how to do it, and they don't really believe that it really works. So right now I'm trying to fill that gap of like, okay, I promise this is going to work, you know. But yeah, like it's the probably the second thing that comes up actually for improving climbing technique is, oh, I need to get more flexible. It's like first it's getting strong, and then it's getting flexible.
As far as like the entrepreneurial business side, that's really kind of perfect, isn't it? Because they
Yeah.
know they don't know. Like they know they
Right.
want it and they don't know how to get it.
Yeah.
And there aren't many people, from what I see, that actually know how to deliver that. Even in the in the athletic development world, where you'd think it should be common,
Yeah.
it's still like, oh, if you didn't develop strength as a child, you're never going to have it. Like some of the best strength coaches in the world say that. Others are
Yeah.
saying it's going to make your tendons aren't going to give you as much elasticity, so you're going to be weak if
Yeah.
if you maximally stretch if you get extended range of motion in the lower body, you're going to lose power. Therefore, you shouldn't do it. Therefore, just use ice and traditional therapies like to kind of get your tendons back online and
Right.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it creates like a massive opportunity of all these people out there that have been basically lied to, whether you know, whether it was deliberate or just, negligent, like not, or, misinformation for whatever reason. We know that it can change. So that gives
Wow.
you such a huge opportunity. It looks as though you're taking that opportunity. Like what are you, talk to us about the results that you're actually seeing with people and the feedback. It
Oh
must
my
be a lot of
gosh.
fun.
Yes, like everyone who's going through the flexibility programs are just like, oh, I can't believe that I've been able to make these kinds of gains in such a short amount of time. And then like there's the visible differences in like the stretch. So let's say we're doing the splits or something. But then they're like, oh, I haven't climbed at all, but I'm better at climbing. And that's what I love to hear. I'm like, wow, you haven't been climbing, but you're still maintaining your strength. And now you're able to move. And that's fantastic. And um, yeah, almost every single person has said that. And that's just like gold right there.
And are you programming their strength work as well for all these people, or?
Yeah, so when I'm running my flexibility course, it's a group course, so we're really focusing on the flexibility component.
Yep.
But I do give them some options if they want to continue some of their climbing training at home. So we'll do hangboard training,
Yep.
so I'll give them a little layout for that to keep their fingers strong, maybe even get them a little bit stronger. And then there's a little bit of strength work for the upper body. Otherwise, all of the flexibility work has like the strength component in it, when we're working that flexibility for the lower body.
If you're do a lot of the people that you work with from the rock climbing background, do they train strength in traditional, like do they generally value like traditional strength training of like, or is it just chin ups? Like do they value even chin ups, or is it more like I just want to be on the wall?
It's really interesting. So climbers, I think climbers or like climbing as an industry is still kind of forming its identity a little bit about like how do we go about getting better at this thing. And for the longest time, climbers were like, we're not like, we don't train, we just climb. Like that was like a really big mentality for them. That was uh the identity I think a lot of like climbers wanted. Like they're hardcore, all they do is climb. But now that it's in the Olympics, it's going to be in the Olympics for the first time this year. And there are fantastic athletes that the technology had to catch up somehow. And so like I see the elite athletes doing lifting. So they're working on lifting, but it also seems like a lot of it is still like body weight centered unless they're doing pull-ups. So they'll do
Yep.
weighted pull-ups, weighted hangs. Otherwise it is like it's definitely more geared to the body weight component. I think
Yeah.
that's where climbers feel maybe most comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, like otherwise, like lifting is still we're still trying to get like lifting in there. And I've been a victim to just body weight training. I think it's fantastic. I wrote a book about it, Simple Strength.
Yep.
But you can't just do the one thing. You have to have some variety, and lifting heavy just gives you so much more in terms of like a spectrum and confidence as well. So I see a shift. It's shifting, but I
Mm.
would say that still people are just thinking, I need to just work on pulling and work on my fingers, and that's it. Like, and climb a lot. Um,
Yep.
and we have like such a high rate of injury in
Mm.
climbing because of the high volume.
Yep.
So yeah, that's slowly changing. Yeah.
It just creates huge opportunity for people, for you to really offer people solutions. And I think bringing solutions from hand balancing, bringing solutions from the strength training world, from people like Charles Poliquin, and
Yeah.
the knees over toes is like an extension on the Charles Poliquin methodology. Reverse engineering that stuff for forearms, like we've been chatting a little bit about it. Like it
Yeah.
makes so much sense, and you can add potentially so much value where people are using icing and not anti-inflammatory creams and things like that can have really negative impact on the tendon health, on the gut, etc. Like
Yeah.
it's cool that you definitely have so much, the potential to do good and to change perspectives. That's
Yeah.
the fun of it, I guess, is expressing those ideas more clearly and getting to new people. It does seem like a really kind of high innovation space as well. I just bought one of those Tindex. The
Yes.
like that.
Because I think I shared the link with you. Was that right? In the
I
group?
maybe I looked at
Yeah.
it a while back, and
Okay.
then I think because I don't remember who showed me then, like a
Yeah.
little while back, and then I remembered about it again, and I remembered like it was the guy. He's got a big YouTube channel. You probably know his name.
No, I
I'm sure
don't. I'm so bad with
no.
names.
Well,
Yeah.
it's one of the guys, one of the biggest names in rock climbing on YouTube.
Yeah.
He's behind it, but
Yeah.
I want to actually use that device for other, especially upper body movements and stuff, because I'm training like mostly sort of body weight and modified stuff and using isometrics and that sort of stuff. So having like a force transducer makes
Yeah.
a ton of sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, but it seems like there's a lot of cool innovations in that space. There's some cool apps, and there's a few companies that seem to be, really evolving the space.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The isometric training is probably the most overlooked. Like people don't think about the isometric training. And when you look at climbing, there's a lot of isometrics in it. Like you're practically in isometric a lot of the time. And then you're making very explosive movements and then hitting into an isometric position.
yep.
So yeah, the Tindek, and like there's another one called the G-Force, which is like $1,000, but it measures rate of force development.
Okay.
So that one is amazing, amazing device. Like yeah, that one is probably the best on the market
Do you
right
know how
now
many
for
kilos it goes
doing
up
that.
to? It must go higher if
It's
it's
pretty
more
high.
explosive. Yeah.
Yes, it's pretty high. It might even be a couple thousand kg. I'm not sure, but it's like higher than any other device I've seen.
Because we've been chatting about it on the Real Movement app, and a few of the guys have actually built their own versions. And then there's like an old website called Dragon Door, who's
Yeah.
where Pavel Tsatsouline used to. Yeah, so they sell one. I think it's
It's
maybe
the ISO chain.
$500 or something. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it's for isometrics, but it has like
Yeah.
the number, the number feedback. I mean, I know quite a few coaches who've built their own, and then there's a few like super fancy tech, but I just feel like it hasn't really been solved that well yet. So I actually
Yeah.
messaged the guys from Tindeck of like, are you interested in doing a higher force version of this,
Yeah.
and potentially collaborating on it? But I will check out this G-Force. I'm sure there's, someone must be solving it out there that I just haven't stumbled across it. But I have like cast the net out of, through my Instagram networks and whatnot, and I haven't found a good solution yet. But you may have just shared it with me, so that'll be
Yeah.
cool.
They have
to check
different
out.
tiers. So they have the GeForce has a really big device, which is like the high end one, and then there's
Yep.
one that's a little bit smaller that
Yep.
I think would be just as good. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's interesting. How long have you actually been in business in, like when did you write that book? Is very first question.
Yeah, I wrote Simple Strength in 2015. I have been climbing for maybe like 12, 13 years or something like that. And I was a tennis player before that in my previous life.
Okay.
So I've been coaching for a really long time, but climbing coaching probably for about 10 years.
Did you coach tennis as well?
I did. Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I think it's a good background. It's quite technical movement patterns and
yes. So it's all about technique. That's really like and moving as fast as you can. Yeah. And like surprisingly, that kind of training really transferred over to climbing. Like I was like fairly developed. I couldn't do pull-ups, but I could move really well. And I was very like surprised by that. I'm like, how am I better, like pretty good at climbing than most beginners? So I'm like, okay, I think the time that I put into tennis really helped.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, and then I've been doing like my online coaching 100% just for the last year, and then before that I was like helping people online, like coaching them online as like when you work in the climbing industry, you don't get paid very much, so I was coaching on the side for a very long time to one, I loved it, that's like this is what I love to do, but it helped to supplement my income.
Yeah. So have you been full-time doing this
for
like
a year?
You were a tennis coach and then you've been like rock climbing. Have you had other professions or?
So my dad is in the hotel industry. And so I grew up in kind of that space, and I did try to be in the hotel industry. Like it's awesome. It's really like it's fun. But it wasn't the thing. Like sports has always been what I love. And no, I haven't really had any other industries, which is really interesting. I was a researcher for a long time. Because I have my master's degree, and I was thinking about getting my doctorate, and so I did research for a couple of years in Boulder at their like sport and exercise lab. Yeah, and I taught for a while in college as well. So dabbled in a couple different things.
Did you study exercise science or?
Yeah. So it's exercise science is my bachelor's, and my master's is in human movement and sports conditioning.
Yeah, cool. So you're one of the few who actually made it to private business, being able to work, in what you do for yourself.
Yes. The education component is, I really pushed for my education because I wanted to stay in the US. So I'm actually Australian. I grew up in Townsville, and
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And like there, if you're a tennis player, you either have to go pro when you're done with high school, or you go to school or get a job or something. But I wanted to do both, and the US offered both. Like you can go to school and continue to play. So I was like, yes, I'm going to try to get a full ride at a college in the US and see how far I can push my tennis. And So that's how I came over to the US. And I just like, I loved the cities that I was in. I was like, I want to stay here. So I ended up just pushing to stay here, and education was the easiest way, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, because you have to show that you're not taking someone else's job away, that, oh, this is
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
highly skilled person. So that was like my number one motivator, was to try to stay in the US. And like the climbing and even the tennis was like so great here. But I miss Australia. I definitely miss Australia.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's crazy. So where did you arrive to first when you went to the US?
I first came to Iowa, which
Yeah.
is probably like, I had no idea. I was like, all I heard is that I should stay away from the south part of the US. Like that's it. So I chose all the colleges like kind of more on the western side. So I was in Iowa for a year, for 2 seasons, so a year and a half. So that's Division 1. But they cut our program. At the time, a lot of colleges were cutting their women's programs, especially. So I was like, this is a sign that I should leave Iowa. So I went to Denver, and I
Yeah.
played for 2 seasons there, which was the best decision.
Yeah.
I love Denver, and that's where I started climbing as well.
Yeah. It's a cool city.
It's
You know,
awesome.
Boulder,
Yeah.
like just
Yeah.
not too far away, is a good
That's
place
right.
to arrive to, I think.
Yeah.
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 How did you find it initially? Like, how was the adjustment from Australian life to being a college student in the US?
Well, you can tell by my accent that I'm not Australian anymore. So like when I moved, it was the hardest thing for me was trying to fit in and making sure like, you know, that I was being one of the people, because I kind of knew, I was like, I really want to stay here. And the me being different in Iowa was a little different, because like I'm a person of color, like I am a foreigner. I took a scholarship away from an American, and that, like in Iowa, that's where I had probably the hardest time, actually. Like
Okay.
I was not greatly accepted. Like it was me and like two other international students. We were just like, oh my God, we don't feel like we fit in here. And like my accent, people would just not be able to understand me. And I'm like, why can't you? I'm speaking English. Like, so it was actually Iowa where I started to try to like force my accent a little bit. And then when I moved to Denver, things were a little different in Denver. Like I felt so much more accepted, and yeah. And I'm queer. So like Denver was definitely more open to that than in Iowa. So
you're right in this place that just really
like,
wasn't very accepting of anything
Yeah.
about you.
Yeah. And like tennis was great, but I was like, you know what, gotta go.
Yeah.
And Denver was awesome. So
Was
yeah,
it good
but
for you to be in that environment, like as a from a personal development level of like accepting that not everybody likes you? You know, I think like there's some benefit to that. I think like, you know, I think a lot of people try to people please, and like, and I know it's a thing for me, like if someone doesn't like my program or they don't like a post or whatever, like that fear of you know, criticism and not pleasing everybody, it really drives a lot of people's decisions through life. Or like, I won't try this, I won't try that, because what if somebody doesn't agree with it? I imagine that maybe you became desensitized, like to a degree, to you kind of know they're going to judge you anyway, and you can't do anything about it. So
yeah,
play on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think like even in Australia, I would say like I've always been a people pleaser. I was like constantly trying to live up to people's expectations and try to fit into some sort of mold. And in Townsville, like I don't know if you've ever been there, but it is a very small town where I again, like I didn't really quite feel myself in
Queensland's probably
Townsville.
like Texas in a way, maybe, or
Yes.
where would you say it's most like in the US?
No, for sure. It's like deep southern Texas. Yes.
In
And
Townsville, especially more than Brisbane or Sunshine Coast, a bit different. But
yeah, Brisbane was great. Actually, I lived in Brisbane for a year before moving to the US, and it's actually fantastic. So I think like just like finally, when I like moved to Denver and realized what acceptance really was, I was like, oh, okay. Like, I guess I'd always been like, well, I just don't fit in. I'm like, it feels kind of crunchy. It's weird. And yeah, I think now it, like what you're saying is like, yeah, I am used to not always fitting in and just being kind of like this entity out here trying to do my own thing, and hopefully it'll work, you know? Yeah.
It's funny, but I think like in business, if you don't make that decision, you're probably not going to win. Like in small business, in these, you know, these entrepreneurship, etc. Like if you don't come to terms with that, like that some people are not going to be your customers, and some people are actively going to be negative about things that, you know, you believe in and you think you're really being positive and helping people.
Yeah.
Like going through that is like part of it's like the puberty of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
If you go through it in other ways, I think for me, like it might have been, like I spent a lot of time in Latin America and backpacking and stuff in my 20s, and you know, maybe that made it a little bit easier for me to kind of just go like, yeah, I'm going to give this a go, because I'd moved around so much. And then I lived in France, you know, working with the rugby team there before I went back to Australia. Like I think I'd already been through a lot of that stuff of like being the odd one out, like, you know, being a white guy in Latin America, you know, you're always kind of called names and you're not used to being called names. And like they're really like just fun with their labels. They have no like political correctness kind of, it's not in a lot of the cultures down there. And so, yeah, all that stuff was like, I think that really did help me when I decided to start a business. But, you know, you still, and it's still there. Like no one likes to be hammered by people saying that you're a bad person for whatever the technique is that you're trying to deliver, or the type of diet that you, you know, you're practicing or offering to other people or whatever. But interesting.
I think it did help as well. Like the strength and conditioning world, like there's still not as many women as I would like to see. But when I first started in strength and conditioning, like 10 years ago, I think I got my certification. And like what's great is that climbing has always, like, I felt pretty supported by the climbing industry in terms of like being a coach. Sure, I had like people always like question me about, oh, why why would you do this? But not in like a curiosity way. However, like having that mindset of like, I know I can do this, like this is what I love, and I just got to keep pushing, and at some point this is going to work. And like I think that like my life experience has helped me just continue to be in this space, even though there's not as many strength coaches yet that are women, you know.
Yeah. I think that's like, to me, like now, like being really passionate about business, it's like, yeah, that's where the opportunity is. Like you're going to like people are really going to identify with you, and then you're going to like have that fanatical fan base. And I can see like with the content that you're putting out, and, you know, you're doing a lot of things right from what I can see from a business perspective. Like, yeah, like she's really going to crush it. Like it's going to grow, it's going to work. And you have been doing that, I guess. Like share a little bit about like that entrepreneurial online sort of business journey so far.
Oh man. Yeah. So I quit my full-time job in 2019. It was like the end of 2019. And at that point I was like, I want to do this thing. I don't really know what I'm doing. I really don't. I've heard you should do some Instagram posts. And so that, like, I'm talking about marketing. Like in terms of marketing, I've just like had no idea. And eventually, like, I don't know if you know, like Ryan Hurst from GMB. So he was a mentor, like he still is a mentor of mine. So when I first quit, he called me, he's like, how you doing? I'm like, I'm freaking out. And he helped me kind of like formulate like how I wanted to structure my business. And so I came up with a little bit of a plan, and just like started putting stuff out there. And that was like the best thing I could do, was just start doing that. And every night I'd wake up in a sweat, like this isn't going to work. I'm not going to make enough money this month. But eventually, like every month after month, like it started working, and then COVID happened. So that kind of changed my business model again. I had to completely shift. And that's when I found you guys, at
Yeah.
Real Movement.
Do you remember how? Like, how did you come across us? Was it with
Ben Patrick?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I had started doing Ben stuff kind of at the end of 2019.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, this is like fucking awesome. And then that's how I found you guys. I think in March or April is when I started training with you guys.
Had you had knee issues with tennis?
So tennis, no. It was actually after tennis that I was actually like, I think because of all the lateral movement, and I did almost no lower body strength training, that I think my ligaments were not super strong. And I eventually, I was actually training for climbing. I was doing like box jumps and stuff, and I actually tore my ACLs, both of them, 1 year after the other. 1 year apart. Which is very common, especially in women.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so that when I saw his knee protocol, I was like, yeah, I got to do this. Because like the ACL, because I took it from the patella tendon, that's where the graft was taken from, which is rough. And I don't recommend anyone to do that, especially if you want to continue jumping. So that the recovery was fine, but like in terms of my athleticism, like my jump height just like completely decreased like by a lot.
Yeah.
So like I'm still trying to work on getting back to what I used to be able to jump. And his program was great. But yeah, so like after I found you guys and like kind of restructured my whole business, I'm like, because I've always been into mobility training for climbing, but I also didn't believe in stretching. And then when I started working with like Lucas and like Emmett has always been in like the background for me, Emmett Lewis, I was like, oh, it's really interesting the things that you're doing, but that seems very circus or like dancer specific. So I wasn't a true believer until I started hanging out with you guys. And and then that like has really helped me shift and recreate my business. But in the end, it's like I just had to keep going. Like that was really it. I felt like there were definitely points where I was like, I'm quitting. Like I'm going to go back to a different job. And still like today, it's like, who knows? Just keep going.
Yeah. There's no guarantees. I think there's no, but that's kind of the fun of it too. It's all built on trust and human relationships and real results. Like, I think it's a great place to live from, but it's not for everybody. Some people are just loving that. They just want the security of a paycheck. But it's cool. It's really cool to see. Like, there's no way I would ever reach the people that you're working with, and to have played like a tiny part in what you're doing and see like, that Lucas's work has influenced your work is really fun. Like it's really cool for me. Like that's really why I left rugby to try to do that sort of thing. And obviously like then the connection and collaboration with Ben has like introduced, Real Movement, and then like via that Lucas, and it's just it's cool to see that flow on effect of things. And even you sort of talking about that, Ryan Hurst and Emmett, like I wouldn't have picked that either. Like I went and juggled in the park with Emmett in Ireland in like 6 years ago or something, like before I'd seen too much of his stuff. Someone said, oh, you should go and meet this guy, because I was already doing some juggling and whatever. And really cool guy. And then he ended up presenting for us with Real Movement. Maybe that's why you jumped on, because we had those live live things were a lot of fun that we had there, intensive, and then the other one. But those connections I think are so valuable. Like there's a couple of things there that stand out to me. Like you have had those connections and you have been able to like sort of see those role models, and people are like, this guy's making it work in this way, this person's making it work in that way. And I think having that is a really important thing, that people should recognize that it's okay to see the positive in what someone else is doing and ask them for support with it, or just, kind of borrow ideas, and it makes it so much more fun and more likely to succeed. The other thing that I love that you're saying there is just, you have to get that feedback loop going, like once you're you just keep going and you keep that feedback loop going of like, oh, people like this, and like I'm getting really good results with that. Like publishing your idea and putting your product out there and having a launch, having a, we've spoken about like not every launch goes as well as the other ones, and but that's the fun of it, is in like, I think this is amazing. Now what do people think? What does the market think? And a lot of people never get into that feedback loop. Like they literally don't have a product on the market that people can say yes to, that would allow them to be an online coach. Like so many people want to be online coaches right now, and I'll have the conversation with them. Okay, well, what are you offering? And they literally don't have anything that people can say yes to. Like they're putting a lot of effort into posting and whatnot, but then there is actually nothing on the other side. And oftentimes there's like something broken in the stack. Like it's just too hard for them to get started, or they can get started and they've got fans and they've got a bunch of people on the free ebook or the like super cheap thing, but then there's a barrier either to scaling within that, or like there's nothing where people can invest a bit more if they want a bit more attention. But playing with that model and getting the feedback is the best way, I think, to do it, and looking at what other people are doing, like what's working for other people. What are you testing, experimenting with at the moment?
So right now my offerings are one-on-one coaching, which is like the high end. And then I have my group coaching, which is like mid-range. And they're more like smaller group trainings. And then I have kind of like the self-paced programs. So like that's kind of like what I have. And then I've got my books. And so right now I'm like trying to figure out, how do I market all of these products within the year and be able to run multiple groups? Like, so I'm trying to like figure that out. But I'm missing a tier, which is like kind of like the bottom tier. Like I don't have a lot actually in like the entry point. For people, like I have my book, but then there's nothing else to go to. And so I see that that's like a really big missing component in my business. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. I'm like, subscriptions are awesome. Like they're a lot of work, but that could be a really nice way to get people in. So that's what I'm looking at right now. And like your guys' model is really awesome. I don't think I could scale to that, because like you guys need a lot of people to like run like the quality that you have, at Real Movement. But it's inspiring. Like that's what I would really like to work toward. And I love my one-on-ones though. Like working with people one-on-one is so rewarding. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
It's so great the way that you can tailor it though. Like you test an idea of like, you get to 50 members or 100 members, and then you go like, oh, don't really know all these people. I really preferred it much better when I knew everybody. Like I had to go through that with Real Movement. Like I've always known everybody. And then it got to a point where it's like 200, 250, 300, and then at some point you're like, and people are coming and going because it's cheaper, than what I'd had in the past. So like the level, like people are kind of just checking it out, and it doesn't make them bad people. It's just, it doesn't mean they didn't, get some value or whatever, but, people have things going on in their lives. They have other priorities. Everyone's had economic change in the last, 12 months. So dealing with that for me as a business owner has been like a big change. And I love the fact that you can just, when it's your business, you can pivot and set it up however you want. So, you can go back and say, no, like I really want to know a few people deeply and have a closer relationship with them. Like I'm going to launch like a group for 10 people. And, instantly you have a different business basically. And, that's, I think, that's a real joy of like what we get to do, and just constantly being creative about like, how can we make this experience better? And, I love that. And I love hearing about what other people are going through with their businesses, because now I've been doing this for like 7 years. Generally, I have some ideas or thoughts of like, what if you tried this, or what if you did that? And it's so cool when people are like, they do it, even just starting is the biggest thing, but then, forming their brand and like putting a product out there. But then all those little tweaks can literally be like the difference between being able to be full-time in your own business versus going and stacking shelves or working at a restaurant or, going to work in some clinic somewhere that's like not exactly what you want to be doing. So it's like
Yeah.
huge difference.
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
started to like have people asking you about business ideas and things as well? Like I know you put a lot of effort into your social media and you got really cool content. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's starting to happen, which is interesting because I still feel like I still don't really know what I'm doing. But it's like evident that, it's like, yes, I've been doing this for a while. Like even before I quit my job, I was doing the online coaching on the side. And I think that's the kind of the big thing is like, yes, I was able to form relationships with people over the years, and now I can leverage that, and like we're all helping each other. Like my business didn't just happen in 1 year. Like this has been like since 2015, since I wrote my book. That's basically what I've been pushing a little bit since then, and now I'm reaping the benefits of that. And I think that really should be like, don't forget that, like, you have to put the time in and develop real relationships with people, like that I think that's going to be gold for you like later down the road. And that's probably been like my biggest lessons so far in running a business. And yeah, like I really like hope that like the folks that who are just starting their online business aren't like, you have to understand that, yeah, it just takes a lot of time. But also, if you're dreaming about this thing, like you go to bed and you're like, oh, I want to have this online business. Like, I see the things that I want, like, continue to have that as part of your life. Like, if that goes away, then maybe that's not your passion. Like
yeah.
it really has to be something that you love and that you're ready to work hard for, you know, because
So
it's
it's
not
not like
easy.
passive income. I thought it was
Yeah.
passive income. It's fascinating. I thought,
Yeah, I think that so many online like business coaches or whatever, like now I'm seeing a shift where the business coaches is saying you have to love what you do. But before I remember like that wasn't really been talked about. Like, oh, anyone can do this. Like that is not true. Like,
a
yeah.
lot of guys, yeah, a lot of people are face to face, like personal trainers, they're working face to face, they're doing their 20, 30, 40 hours a week face to face. And
Yes.
then somehow they've been sold on the idea of like, well, if people like me here, then I'll just go online and people will jump on my subscription or I'll just coach them online. I won't even have to spend that time with them. And they're going to pay
Yeah.
me a bunch of money and I'm going to get awesome results.
Yeah.
And then reality, I don't know anybody who's just been like, add it to your bio, and then from there you have like a full-time income online. Like it's
Right. Right.
there's not a path that many people go down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's same for anything. And the fun is in solving the challenges. But for sure, I think what people often is not realized is like if you're going into the global market and you want to do well, then you better bring your A game because people are looking at every sort of business and opportunity out there, and yeah, you have to stand apart. And I guess that's what we're talking about before. Like wherever your point of difference is, like who you are uniquely and what you've been through, like that's really the blessing. And kind of the weirder you are, the better the chance is.
Yeah.
Like because
Yeah.
people are going to be able to recognize, oh, this is not vanilla. Like there's so much vanilla that
Yeah.
your chances of selling vanilla are very, very slim. You need to
Yeah.
be like polka dot bubblegum mint, choc chip, and then someone's going to be after that, and you're going to be the one. Like so, like rock climbing for women with mobility is like it's an awesome niche, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the cool thing as well is like when someone comes from that background of like really caring as a coach and wanting to get awesome results, like I think they're the people that I really love coming across, is like where you're actually really a master of something and then you want to do the online rather than like I don't really have any credibility or real results. I'm not really super well versed as a coach and I want to go online. Like you know, that's probably not the place. It's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
With your training at the moment, like what is what's most exciting for you, like on your own personal journey? I see you super strong on the one arms. Like what's
Yeah.
lighting your fire at the moment?
Well, before moving to Seattle, I was always gunning for double digit, which is just like because I'm a boulderer, so I don't use ropes. And the grading system is a little different than if you were on a rope. And so in bouldering, I always wanted to climb V10. And that's like the grading system goes from V0 to V17, I think, right now.
Okay.
And so like V10's like very high end, like it's like elite. And I was very close multiple times at double digit. And then I moved to Seattle, worked full time, did a lot of other things. So now I'm coming back. I'm like, oh, I'm getting strong again. I've been consistently training for about a year. And I'm like, I'm ready to face that goal again. And so I think that's kind of like the fire right now is to climb that hard. And it's possible, which what's awesome about climbing is that you can just continue to climb for a really long time and continue to get strong.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so that's what I'm looking at right now. And the season right now, like in Seattle, isn't great. So I'm gonna be heading to the desert here in a month to go try to climb some stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess is it more scary? Is it more courage in the bouldering, especially the
Mm.
natural environments? Like you
I
could
think
get some pretty gnarly falls, or
Yeah, it's so different. So yeah, like it can be very scary, but like move per move in a boulder problem is so much harder than on a rope climb. So on a rope climb, you have so many other things to think about. You've got the rope, you've got like safety just in general. You've got like the big fall that you could potentially take. There's also a higher risk of death in rope climbing. Whereas in bouldering, like there's a lot more it's more about the movement and like it's very gymnastic. But if you do choose to climb higher things, you just have to prepare a lot more and just know like I used to be, we call it high ball bouldering. So anything that's above 15 feet is a high ball. And I used to do more of that when my body was a little bit more together and I was younger, like I didn't really care as much. So I don't really do that as much anymore. I'm climbing within my comfort zone. Um,
15 feet's pretty high to fall from without
yes.
control.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
even onto a mat or whatever, it's still pretty
It's
full on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, for bouldering, it's like 15 feet. You're like, whew, okay, I have to think about this a little bit on my fall.
Yeah,
And if you don't know how to fall, that's when climbing feels very scary.
yeah.
And so that's a skill set. Like you just have to keep like practicing over and over again is how do I fall well? Yeah.
So what do you have like a few different options of like, so if you fall in a certain way, then you know how to land from that position versus, because I guess like anyone can jump back off the wall and kind of like, if you fall under control, it's fine. But like, I guess sometimes you kind of not in the optimal
Yeah.
position. Talk to us about how this
Yeah.
falling goes down. Yeah.
Yeah, like I learned actually a lot of my falls in from parkour, and really like no matter what position you're in, try to be as relaxed as possible. And that thought of like I have to be relaxed while I'm falling just isn't very natural. So like most of the time we're falling straight back, and like the legs normally are the first contact. And so like you want to be as soft and controlled, and you kind of like depending on the height. So if it's 15 feet, you're probably going to do a bit of a judo
Yeah.
roll out of it. So you'll fall and like roll back a little bit. Sometimes you'll fall and go to the side. And at that point, you have spotters. So like, you have people on the ground who are there. Their job is to keep you on the pads. So if you're landing kind of sideways, like I'm always just trying to think like protect my head, or hopefully someone is going to protect my head. And my job is to stay as relaxed as possible. And like hopefully like I can roll out of whatever landing position I'm in. Um,
Yeah.
so I would say like look at judo or like parkour, and like those things, those skill sets can really transfer over.
So you try not to be rigid, because if you make yourself rigid, then ligaments and stuff will.
Yeah, it's like a whiplash. Like that's what it feels like. If you're like super tight, like you get all of the whiplash up through like your neck and head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And just how do you find the strength? And now that you've gone further with your lower body mobility, and you know the strength training side of things, like how is that impacting your journey to the V10? Like,
well, what's been great is that all of my flexibility training has been, it's basically taken my body, like, because I'm so much more flexible now, I don't have to pull as hard. So that means I don't have to like focus so much on upper body, which is great because like in terms of handling so much volume, like nowadays it is really hard to train a lot upper body. So the flexibility component has really just helped me elevate my overall movement so that I don't have to necessarily like pound my upper body all the time. So I think that's like the biggest thing that I've seen from my training recently. And like so I've been training for about a year consistently. And so over the next year, my goal is to like continue to push my upper body strength. Like at some point there's diminishing returns, but we always want to see gains somewhere in upper body, especially like finger strength. And that's going to be like, I would really like to be able to hang one arm with like, it's like a half crimp. So your fingers are going to be like this. Like that's my goal. Cause some of the stuff I want to climb, I need to be able to like hold this for at least a second and then, come in.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what I'm gunning for right now.
Very cool. So you're doing isometric work on that position.
Yes.
And do you have something that quantifies that, or you just make one hand like that, and then the amount of strength that you need from the other hand, or how do you like?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. So I have a crane scale, which is not as cool as the Tindeck. I just got the Tindeck actually.
Okay.
But before I had just a crane scale, and once a week I would test my max pull so we have 90 degrees and 120. Those are kind of like the common positions for climbing. And so I would test like 3 to 5 seconds. I'll pull as hard as I can and just measure that over time. But my training would be, so about a year ago was always like 2 arms, and my lower hand, sometimes the lower hand could be the focus. So the lower hand is on a smaller crimp and my upper hand is on something bigger. And I would try to put as much weight over that hand, or vice versa. So this hand is doing most of the work. And then we do a lot of like this positioning, different hand positions. So the hand positions really matter on how your shoulder recruits. So like slopers, like anything like this, that's going to be a lot more shoulder, whereas this is going to be more bicep. So trying to work as many different grip positions using isometrics. So it's like 5 seconds is like the very common isometric hold. And then we'll do long duration isometrics either as a warm up or on a separate session later in the day. You hold like 1 or 2 for 20 seconds. And so now that I have the Tindeck, I'm like going to be really interested in seeing like how I can use that, not just for upper body stuff, but also like my hamstrings, because hamstrings play such a critical role in climbing. So we have what's called a heel hook, where you're just like putting your heel on you, you crank really hard. And again, it's mostly an isometric position. And your hamstrings keep you in on the wall as well. Like you're just pulling yourself. So I'm looking forward to like seeing how the Tindeck can really help those positions, and measuring, like being able to measure leg strength with the Tindeck, and then like measuring that over the course of a flexibility program. I think that would be really cool, like measuring your end range strength. don't know how I'm going to do it, but that's kind of like what I've been thinking about the last like week since getting the device.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like that's the fun of it, I guess, is always being able to experiment. I was just speaking with Tom Hibbert, who's had the world record in the under 90 log clean and press, like world's strongest man type stuff. He's training some world's strongest man guys. Got a gym over here in England, and we're just chatting about like it's just as long as there's an experiment running, like life is good. Like you're testing out ideas, you're learning new stuff, you're sharing the best of it. Like it's just makes life fun. Like and sometimes it doesn't go to plan, right? So when it doesn't go to plan in rock climbing, it's very common to see that tendonitis, right? We've been chatting a little bit about it, but like, what's getting best results in tendonitis? What do people, not know that they need to know?
Yes, this is tricky. So like, I would say sometimes it's a muscle imbalance. Like, we could work the balance of muscles for pulling and pressing, like making sure that, like a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 pull press, like you're at least doing that, like have some sort of pressing in your program. And the isometrics are great. They're great too. Like the holding the neutral grip pull up is going to like balance out most things in the upper body in a pulling position. And then isometric against the pins, pressing the bar against the pins for in a bench press position, that seems to also just like take care of some of that stuff. So like the muscle balance is there. Like I think climbers just don't really put enough emphasis on pressing and any other like, tricep work or anything like that. The most common thing though is just too much volume. Like people are climbing like 4 or 5 days a week with not enough rest time. So the frequency and the volume really have to be, that's a science, and it's going to be very individual for everyone. And if you just scale that back, all of a sudden tendonitis is not an issue anymore. So that's like, those are the two areas that I think are the most common for tendonitis.
I guess it's really easy to do maximal effort stuff, like to fall into doing maximal effort most days, where in strength training, like most people won't max out every day. And especially with bigger movements, you don't really want to, like with squats or bench press, like you have to kind of psych yourself up because there's so much energy coming from the nervous system to execute, where if you're going for a small hold, then the central fatigue might not be that big from it, but like the local structural challenge is going to be so high. So it'd be like tempting to hit that maximal stuff, like, or super maximal isometrics and
all the time. Right? Yes. Like, especially when you go outside and it's like, it's a beautiful day and you're like trying this thing and there's a group of people cheering you on and you're just like hammering it over and over again. And that's like the fun part. But then when you're done, you're like, oh, I just wrecked myself, but I'm going to go out tomorrow and do it again, and I think because there's such a fun component to it, people will push themselves beyond, I think, what they can, like their limit.
So do you think climbers should be doing like dips and push-ups and, even bench press, like
100%.
What percentage of them actually would be doing that, do you think? Or?
I would say like most people that I train don't do any kind of bench press. And when they come to me, they're like, oh, I'm going to do bench press. And they don't know how to bench press. So they don't even know how to chest press, or they don't even know how to do a push-up, that. To me, that's like, okay, like climbing has been such a focus, and like the climbing industry continues to say, just keep climbing. And that's how you're going to get better. So like the second, people start training with me, they're like, oh, all of a sudden I feel really strong just generally. And now I know how to do these other movements. And also the thing about climbing is that it's not really part of the fitness industry. So people who, people who come into climbing are often maybe they were runners, or maybe they were sedentary and, they're engineers. Like a lot of climbers are engineers or doctors or something like that, where their life has been consumed by work. And then now they're going to come climb, and they just have like their skill for moving their body is pretty low. And so like they have to learn how to now move their body and like, oh, this is a bicep curl. Cool. I'm going to do that. And that's fine. Like, and that's my job, is to help people, learn that. And how does that fit into climbing? And what's like, it's a little sad because like, I think people are like, oh, I'm cross training. It's taking time away from climbing. Like, no, like, yes, maybe, but in the end, this is going to help your climbing in the end. Like in the long road, you're going to be so much stronger, fitter, healthier if you're doing this other stuff.
Yeah. To me, it makes sense that if you just increase the horsepower, like the basic kind of strength, and especially the range of motion in the hips and whatnot, then there's just more tools to work with. You still got to like fine tune them for that specific activity. But it's like if you take a bodybuilder versus one of those doctors or whatever, and you have them go do weightlifting or gymnastics, the person with the muscle it's going to be easier to wire in new patterns to that person than put a bunch of muscle and tendon ability and whatnot into the sedentary person. So the sooner you can get them to like a elite rock climbing strength numbers, then those skills are gonna, they're gonna have more options for the skills and whatnot as well, I guess.
Yeah. And climbers are very adverse to putting on muscle mass.
Yeah.
They're like, well, if I put on any kind of weight, that's going to be harder for me to pull. I'm like, okay, yeah, like some education needs to happen here in terms of like muscle size and strength. Like I think there's a disconnect there for a lot of people as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the best guys are pretty wiry, hey? Like, are there any? Is the boulder body shape any different to? I guess there's like the speed climbing, which is just super powerful, and there's probably a few different body types depending on.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about that. That'd be fascinating to hear more about.
Yeah, definitely. Like so you've got the alpine climbers who, because they're climbing all day and they're just doing pitch after pitch after pitch. And I would say like technical rock climbing is not part of alpine climbing. They're just placing gear in cracks and they're climbing kind of like this, so they're using the cracks and like their fingers in a very different way. Those folks are going to probably be kind of like the less muscular, more cardio adapted or endurance adapted. So like they could be maybe smaller in stature, like they don't need a ton of muscle essentially. And then there's the sport climbers, which like most people know, like Alex Honnold, and then Adam Ondra. He's like definitely one of the top sport climbers in the world. Very skinny, but very toned as well. Like they're like, you can just see every single muscle. So it's like low body fat percentage, very sinewy, and but the girth is not as big as a boulder, because bouldering would be like the most gymnastic of all disciplines. And now you're seeing like men and women with bigger muscle size, more mobility, like that they're just like kind of like the freaks of the climbing world. And so like I think now, like when you see the competition aspect, those athletes are definitely training a little bit more kind of like gymnastic style to get their body ready for that kind of thing. And then there's like speed climbing, which they're built kind of like sprinters, very, very similar. Yeah.
So the boulder is which would you say are the better physically developed, the speed climbers or the boulders?
I don't know. I would say the boulders, only because there's so much variation in their movement. Whereas like speed climbing, the route never changes, like never. Like it is a set thing. It's just like a sprint. Like you just do one thing and that is it. And so I think speed climbing is really helpful for bouldering, and bouldering is really helpful for speed climbing. But in terms of like full development, I'm not sure. I think that's a hard call for me. I would
Yeah,
prefer like bouldering training over speed climbing training anytime.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 The variety and complexity, like always learning,
Yeah.
experimenting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And
Yeah.
what's the next big thing for you then in terms of your progression? Is the focus like the V10, or is it really like seeing the next level progression with your business? Like, if you could only choose one, where would you go?
Oh, Keegan, that's really hard.
That's
Um,
good. So you really
that
love both
is,
of
yes,
them. Yeah,
because one feeds into the other.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I think that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned is that I practice exactly what I preach. Like
yeah,
I can't have it any other way. And for me to push my body and my limit will only help me be a better coach in the end. Um, so, but in terms of like marketing, I think my business and my marketing, that's like my my weakest skill set. And so like I would say the weakest part of this whole chain is my marketing. And I think that's really where I should be focusing most. Yeah.
I think you're doing some great stuff with your marketing, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's yeah. I mean, very few people get to the point that you're at as well. Like, I think a lot of personal trainers and coaches and people who graduate from exercise science like tend to be high achievers and tend to be kind of hard on themselves, like played hard in elite sport, etc. Like, it's also good to recognize like you really are doing something that a lot of people value. You're making an impact, and like to get to the point that you've got to already is super uncommon, and it, like, it's something to be really proud of. Like, every now and then it's good to like acknowledge that, and then yeah, for sure we're going to go back to work, like that's our nature, but like
Yeah.
you really have done something great, and yeah, it's cool to be able to sit down and share a bit more about that journey with you. So I appreciate you taking the time today. It was lovely to get to know you much more than text messages and whatnot, which is a lot less human than this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Keegan. I really appreciate hearing that.
Thanks so much.
Cool.
And
All right.
yeah, look forward to the next chapter.
Yeah. We'll catch up soon.